Okay, it's my privilege to introduce our executive lecture speaker today for the Reed and Christine Halliday Executive Lecture Series. Our speaker today is Lee Livingston. Lee grew up in a small town in Wyoming called Cody, Wyoming, and then also lived in San Francisco. And that was in his early years. He's also lived in Manchester, England, Illinois, and Texas, but he feels like he's saved the best for last, living here in Utah County. He's been living in Utah for over 20 years. Lee's career started with FiberNet and net hosting, and he's been a major part of those for a number of years and plans on being a part of that for years to come. Lee is actually an alum of UVU. We're proud of that. And Lee has been involved in a number of organizations, including Corporate Alliance. He's involved in the Utah Valley Chamber of Commerce, the United Families International, Boy Scouts of America, and other professional organizations. In his spare time, he likes to be with his family, and he always says he doesn't get enough of it. He's married to his wife, Susanna. They've been married for 21 years this year, and all I can say is bless her heart. And they have 6 children. So Lee graduated from Brigham Young University with a bachelor's in 1993, then went on to get a master's degree from the University of Chicago in '95. Just a little side note, I think Lee should have been a professional bull rider. I've seen him riding one of those mechanical bulls, and the guy is amazing. I don't know how he does it. So let's give a big round of applause to former pro bull rider and our today's speaker, Lee Livingston.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, they asked me if I wanted to do the mic or this rock star thing over the year. So I thought, well, I haven't done that before. Well, I'll tell you how I know how to ride bulls, because I'm from Cody, Wyoming. Come on. So anybody out there from Cody or from Wyoming? A few of you, okay. I was looking at faces as you were coming in, because I know quite a number of people your age, shall we say, and but I didn't recognize any faces. Anybody out there I missed that knows me? No, not a soul. Thanks, Brad. Appreciate that. Well, Brad neglected to mention a couple of things. There's an important part of my career that we don't talk a lot about, but you can see me here with Ralph Macchio. You guys are probably too young to even know who that is. Yeah, you know, I was an important teacher, sensei for Ralph in this movie, and then you know it was just a supporting role. But later, then you know I really had the opportunity to take some steroids and become a superstar. So, yeah, oh, that's good. What does that mean? Move on. Here's, you can see my youngest son, James. He's now getting into the act. So, you know, he's planning on carrying on this other alternative tradition of our family. So, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. To be honest, as I reviewed some of the people that you've been able to hear from over the last year and several years, people like Hal Wing and Dick Marriott, Tom Dixon, Jeanette Bennett. You know, anyway, I saw a number of people, and I thought, wow, they are scraping the bottom of the barrel when they are pulling in Lee Livingston. But I am grateful to be here, and I hope that my approach to today's lecture is probably a little bit different, emphasis. We're going to start out with the beginning here. Surprisingly, wow, 2 Facebook comments today. Here's what I'm going to do, guys. I brought along a few gifts, so if you go to Facebook, I'm sure that all of you have your Wi-Fi access or something right now, and just go to FiberNet Corporation on Facebook and like us. And at the end of the presentation, I'm going to pull some random names out, and I'm going to hand out some coats and some things that I brought. I don't know if they're going to fit, you know, the people who I pick or anything, but we'll just try to make that work. Okay, so beginning at the beginning. Oh boy. Yeah, that's me, guys. You notice my, double-breasted there? I started at an early age. This is, my begging years. Must have been at some kind of a parade or something. I was collecting something. But, honestly, I have always had fun with being an entrepreneur. And so when I was a kid, instead of playing like the rest of the kids, oftentimes I was out selling something. It was pretty common. You'd find me out on the street corner selling lemonade. Anybody do that? Is that even done anymore? Okay. I sold rocks. Yep. I would, low margin type, high margin type stuff, so low cost items, just go pick them out in the field and then sell them for a high profit. That's one business strategy, make sure you keep track of that one. So Brad mentioned some fun things about my career, but I have to say that one of the most important things I think of when I think about my career beginning was after leaving BYU, which incidentally I had spent about half the time here on UVU's campus, which was actually my favorite, all of my favorite classes, and I felt like I learned more at UVU than I learned at BYU. It might have had something to do with many of the classes there were like thousands of students in a huge auditorium, and you had no idea who you were in this sea of geniuses. But anyway, so as I finished up and graduated from BYU, I went back to work for the family business. Anybody done that? Okay, it's a unique experience. A lot of interesting things and dynamics you learn when working for family. But that was an important part of my career, and I will always look back on that experience as having taught me a number of important things to help me later in life. So after that, then I went out to Chicago and worked for a venture capital firm and a property management company. The property management company actually managed a property that was up in North Chicago that was really a lot of fun. It was the first mall designed around the automobile, owned by the Rockefeller Foundation, actually. And it was really a fun experience to be there. So after that, though, I was kind of planning to go into venture capital, which is why I had these kind of odd degrees, even though I was interested in business, but found an opportunity to go out and be a part of a company that I was going to take public, and that was FiberNet Corporation back in 1996. The genius of that was that at that point, basically, IPOs for internet service providers had passed. So kind of missed that window of opportunity, so never got to take FiberNet Corporation public. Actually, in the end, over 20 years later, basically, for our business, I'm glad we didn't. And I'd have to share with you some other time why I feel that way. But I will tell you that there are a lot of complications created when you're in a publicly traded sector instead of a private company. All right. Well, so I entitled my thoughts today about the things that I learned along the way. Okay. I'm going to start off with just some basic principles that I think are really important in any setting, but particularly in a business setting. And the first one's going to surprise you. But if you know what a chiasmus is, you might pay attention to this point because this is the beginning and then there will be an end. Okay, so this is my family. Recent picture. Anybody recognize what's in the background? Mount Vernon. Wow. Good job. Okay, so that's George Washington's home place. That was just this past summer. Great experience. This is my family. Okay, why am I talking about my family in a business setting? Well, to be honest, and this has a lot to do with my switch from going into venture capital, my family is my most important goal in my life, okay? And there are a lot of choices in business that can take you away from family. So for me, that was number one. So I want to mention that first. Okay, second, most of you are probably too old to know who Bugs Bunny is. I don't even know if that's a character you see anymore, but that was, Saturday morning type stuff for us on TV. This was Bugs Bunny's version of the tortoise and the hare. Okay, so why am I presenting this as a basic principle of what I've learned along the way? Well, because I truly believe that the tortoise's way is the better way. Okay, there are a lot of strategies in business that I would liken unto the hare. The better ones, I believe, are the tortoise strategies. Okay. All right. One of my favorite quotes, Mahatma Gandhi. There are 7 things that will destroy us: wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, religion without sacrifice, politics without principle, science without humanity, business without ethics. Okay, so fundamentally, I believe that it's just not fun to be in business, and long term, you're not going to survive in business if you don't have basic fundamental principles at play. I believe that sooner or later, not unlike the hare and the tortoise analogy, sooner or later, if you don't have ethics, if you don't have all of these good principles to correct the potential wrongs that can go on in the business world and in other aspects of our life, then you are going to ultimately fail. May not be today, may not even be tomorrow, but it will happen. Another great quote. Oh, got cut off, huh? Okay, well, hopefully everybody knows who this is. Abraham Lincoln, great quote from him: "People are just as happy as they make up their minds to be." Okay, I believe that. Attitude reflects leadership. Attitude is a very important aspect of being successful in business. Poor attitudes, bad attitudes, whatever you want to call it, are often the cause of a lot of problems within business. Okay, that was really a great quote, but we're going to move on. Okay. One of my favorite characters, you'd expect this from somebody from Wyoming, John Wayne. This has actually become, I think in recent years, one of his most popular quotes, but life is tough. It's even tougher when you're stupid, okay? I love that quote. And if you think about it, it has real application, because a lot of the things that happen in life that we don't like, we don't want, that are bad, often have something to do with being stupid. How about this other one? I remember this in one of his movies. You're short on ears and long on mouth. Okay? There are books, lectures, studies, enormous works in business that have been done on that principle about listening. Brad mentioned one of the organizations that I've been involved in, the Boy Scouts of America. They have a part of a wood badge course that's called Listening to Learn. It's a fabulous lecture, but we don't have time to talk about it here. But basically, if we would listen more and talk less, we'll find greater success in business. All right. So the second category that I wanted to mention today that I think is incredibly important in business are goals, okay? I hope this is probably a fairly common principle taught in the business school, but who knows what the Pareto principle is? Anybody? Raise a hand. Oh, okay. Named after a guy, Vilfredo Pareto, okay? He was an Italian economist. Back in the 1800s, I think, he did a study on his little town and found out that for some reason, 80% of the businesses and the property that were owned in his town were owned by 20% of the people in the town. Okay, and so he thought, that's interesting. So he decided he was going to go out and check and see if this applied in other broader scenarios. And so he looked at it in terms of the entire country of Italy and did this study in his time and found out that, sure enough, 80% of the property and the businesses were controlled or owned by about 20% of the population. So fast forward to today, basically this principle, named after Vilfredo Pareto, the Pareto principle, has been applied almost universally in so many aspects of our lives, but particularly in business. Today, I would like to associate it with goals, because what they've found out about goal setters is that they are the 20%ers. Okay? I'm going to show you this little image. Now, you might think that's backwards, but why is the 80% the small portion of the pie and the 20% the big portion of the pie? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you can apply it in many different ways, but in the goal-setting scenario, the people who really get work done in business oftentimes are these 20%ers, these people who set goals consistently. Anybody heard of this SMARTER strategy? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-based. Okay? The last two, the SMARTER, is a little trick that somebody else, I didn't come up with this stuff, but I think it's powerful. E is evaluate, and then we had to twist the last R. It's written. Okay? You've heard those principles in goal setting, right? Those are basic goal setting principles. Specific, measurable. Okay, why am I talking about this? Because the really successful people, anybody who wants to be successful, can be successful if they will apply this principle. I love this, one of my favorite quotes in goal setting. Make no little plans, they have no magic to stir men's blood, and probably will themselves not be realized. Make big plans, aim high in hope and work, remembering that a noble, logical diagram once recorded will not die. Great quote as far as I'm concerned. Make big plans. Sometimes in goal-setting strategies, we limit our performance because we think we got to achieve the goal, but people never reach the highest heights unless they shoot for those stars, okay? Money. All right, so this is another category that I think is very significant in terms of the things that I've learned along the way. I'm going to start off with this quote from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Anybody read this book? Oh, good for you. I love that book. Robert Kiyosaki, I think, was a genius in writing that book. I think a lot of people thought he was too because he made a lot of money on that book. So let's read it. The rich buy assets. The poor only have expenses. The middle class buys liabilities they think are assets. The poor and the middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. Okay? I think this is falling off my ear. Let me see if I can straighten it out for a second. Okay, better? Okay. that's the whole point of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? Okay, the rich dad actually is the opposite of who you might have expected if you haven't read the book. He's the guy that always looked rich. The poor dad, actually it is the other way around now, they're getting that confused, but that's the point of the whole analogy, is that the guy who really is poor is always spending beyond his means, never investing in something that gives him a return. Okay? Think about that principle. It's significant. A study, anybody read this book, Millionaire Next Door? Really, I don't know if this is part of the curriculum, but I love this book. Basically, this was a serious study of the wealthiest people in America, and they learned some basic principles about what these people looked like. What were the kinds of principles and things that they lived by? Sounded pretty important, and I'll give you a few of them here. This is the kind of the summarized list. So, yeah, okay, we're a little scrunched. But the top one, and the one that I gave you the most detail on, is they live well below their means. Okay? Again, that is a basic principle in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But the idea here simply is that they're not the guys that are out there showing off and showing that they have money. In fact, these millionaires in general are doing the opposite because they have a different goal. And what's their goal? Financial independence. Okay? That's what their goal is. Okay, so also these people, they found that these people, they allocate their time, energy, and money efficiently and in ways conducive to building wealth. They believe that financial independence is more important than displaying high social status. Their parents did not provide economic outpatient care. Any idea what that is? Yeah, there's a lot of jokes about trust fund babies and all this kind of thing. But basically, when their kids got in trouble, what did the parents do? Who? These parents? No. These parents wouldn't do it. These parents expected them to dig themselves out of the hole. Anyway, these are great principles. And the last one there, they chose the right occupation for them. Okay? So a significant part of the decision-making process. Okay, I love this one. How am I doing on time? Okay, thank you. Basically, there's two kinds of people when it comes to interest. We heard this one? Okay. Those that understand interest, earn it or receive it, right? Those that don't, pay it. Exactly. Okay? Powerful but basic principle of interest. Okay, so this category of what I learned along the way, this one has been an interesting ride because I will tell you that I didn't always believe these principles. I kind of learned them the hard way, to be honest, in many ways. I mean, some of them are basic, fundamental principles, but when applied together, I think they're powerful. But I will tell you, I learned many of them the hard way. Okay, so the first question that I want to ask you is, what's the basic fundamental function of management? Anybody want to venture that one? Yeah, go ahead. Good. Love it. Anybody want to add anything to that? Yeah. Yeah. Good. Okay. The part that I want you to focus on there is the group or the individuals. Okay. In business, oftentimes we think about customers being the most important focus of any business. Okay. It's important. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is, actually, I believe the more important group to focus on are your employees. Okay? and that true management is about helping your employees and therefore your company be successful, which then ultimately benefits your customers. Okay, so a couple of principles there that I think are significant. The first one is hiring. You know what they say is the most important part of somebody's success in their job? Okay. They have suggested in many studies over the years that the most important decision that the manager can make is before the process even begins, relatively, right? The hiring process. So in other words, the most important decision you can make is finding the right person to do the job. They have done studies that suggest that the most important contributing factor to an employee's success is their commitment, their desire. Not all the other stuff, not the training, not the discipline, not the perks, the incentives, none of that stuff, but the most important factor in employee success is them and their commitment. So you can appreciate why that one is the most important. Not that these other ones aren't. So after they're working for you, you've got to set expectations. Okay, you've got to make sure that they understand what it is that you want them to do. What's the vision of the company? You can appreciate that if you hire some genius, somebody who's incredibly powerful into your organization, but then that person is using that energy going complete opposite direction of your vision, it's going to be a problem. Okay, developing, nice spelling, and the point there simply is that there's always more that we can do. We can always improve somebody's performance. So we never stop learning in an organization. And then motivating, right? Our motivation always ebbs and flows. It's not always tippy top. I know some people who are always high up, always doing great, but not most of us. So helping that process along, a basic part of the management function. So we don't really have a lot of time to talk about this, so I'm just going to but I already mentioned to you that the natural result then of helping your employees be successful is it carries through to helping your customers, making your customers extremely loyal. And I have this basic, I call it the birthday cake principle, which basically says that the most important way to help your customer be loyal is to give them an experience, a feeling that defies logic. So that if in a scenario in comparable products and services or whatever, that they choose to be loyal to you and they don't even know why. It's just because they love it. They love you. They love your business. And so the birthday cake principle is all about how do you do that. Okay, so my final thoughts. Okay, thanks. I appreciate it. Okay, I'll walk you through that birthday cake principle. This is just kind of my way of illustrating this point. But we call this, another name for the birthday cake principle is how to create extreme customer loyalty, okay? This idea begins with a metaphor about making a cake. And back in the good old days, when somebody was baking a cake, they would get some flour and sugar and oil and egg, and they'd put it together, and they would bake a cake, right? Well, somebody came along and figured out that Betty Crocker got this idea of, hey, if I put these ingredients together, I can make that process easier, and so some people are going to buy that, even though maybe it seems too expensive or whatever. Okay, so the next evolution in that process is the bakery. Now I don't even have to bake the cake; I just go and pick it up, bring it home. Well, the final evolution was, and I I hope I can use this name in this setting, but the Cheesecake Factory, okay? Anybody been to the Cheesecake Factory? Okay. Love those cheesecakes. But the point about this is that you don't go to the Cheesecake Factory just to have cheesecake. Okay? You go and you have an experience. Otherwise, you could probably go and get a cheesecake similar in quality and deliciousness down at a particular bakery. I know some that are really good. But so, yeah, why do we go and we spend 5 times as much for that slice of cheesecake in the Cheesecake Factory? The reason is because of the experience, okay? So how does this apply to extreme customer loyalty? The point simply is that is what defies the logic. Because now in the Cheesecake Factory experience versus the, raw ingredients, cost is completely not the issue, right? If it was all about cost, then they would never go to the Cheesecake Factory. So you have to create an experience for your customers that defy logic. And in business, it's an all too common problem that you face where you are being compared strictly on price, so you can appreciate why this principle is important. Okay, final thoughts. I just want to, kind of in that spirit of the chiasmus I was suggesting at the beginning, I want to share with you something that I think is pretty significant. There was a study done by a professor at Harvard that culminated in a book called Wealth in Families. Anybody read that? Okay. What's one of the basic things that we know about families that earn a bunch of money? What happens in the second and third generations? Say it again. Yeah, it's lost, right? Basically, you can count on the fact that about 90% of the wealth that was created in the first generation is gone by the time that you get to the third generation. Okay, why? Yeah, they didn't earn it, they don't appreciate it. Anything else? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Families grow up faster than businesses. Profound. I would agree with that. Okay. Any other thoughts? Well, so the point of the Harvard study was, they already knew that this was happening. But what they wanted to do is they wanted to figure out, why do some of these families, this little measly 5%, make it through the third generation? Okay, and so that was the point of their study. I mentioned to you the Rockefeller Foundation. They were the owners of that retail center in Chicago that I had something to do with, property management. And, why the Rockefellers are a major part of this study, actually. So how did they do it? Well, the basic principle that I want to share with you today is that the way that they were able to pass that on to future generations is they understood one very important thing. Their capital that they were worried about was not money. It was human capital. Okay, and that was the point of that study, which was that it wasn't about passing this money along as much as it was about training the future generations to know how to deal with it properly. And if you know some of the families that have been successful in doing this, the reality is that they got to kind of cut and run on some of those family members. Remember, we said that in The Millionaire Next Door, They don't have these trust fund babies. They don't bail out the kids. So if the kids don't learn the lesson, they don't get to do anything with the money. That was the point of this study. There was a lot of additional, very, very insightful information in that study, but I will tell you that that was the one thing that I took away from that I thought was important. So, again, full circle, for me, the most important principle for me in business is learning how to raise my family. So I know that's a little odd in this setting, but for me, I decided years ago and have learned and relearned and learned again this principle that nothing is more important to me than my family and helping them be successful. And so, if I make some money and I pass it along, and because of that, they take a nosedive, what was it all for? Okay. So those are my thoughts today. I'm glad to have been here with you. Again, I feel honored to be a part of the other speakers that have been part of this lecture series. I think I saved enough time to be able to ask a few questions, if there are any questions, as well as look up on Facebook and see how many of you liked FiberNet, and I will pick some names randomly there. Any questions that you'd like to ask? Yes? Yeah, so long story, but basically it boils down to there are an enormous number of additional challenges that come from being a public company. Costs, management, being subject to a larger body of people. One of the fundamental strengths of a small business is being nimble and able to grow and move in directions quickly and take advantage of changes in the marketplace. That's very difficult to do in a public company that has so many interested parties directing what happens. But fundamentally, the change from going from private to public is an incredibly expensive process, and there's a lot of things out there like reverse mergers and other things like that people are using to try and overcome that expense, and that's just even worse most times. Okay? Any other questions? Yeah.
As far as your employees, do you focus on trying to help them succeed in life and with their families as well, or is it a different relationship than like what you do?
Yeah, good question. So it's getting complicated. I tell you, it really is getting complicated in the workforce. More and more legislation and worries and fears over liability, and it's getting complicated. But yes, we have what's called a wellness program, where, as a matter of fact, I share a number of these principles that I just shared with you today with our employees on a regular basis. Also, physical health and other things. But yes, successful, happy employees, healthy employees, financially fit employees will ultimately give you a better workforce. And there are a lot of studies, actually, that support that and suggest that some of the best workforces even come right here in Utah County. So, good job. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Painful in so many ways, let me tell you. It was a leap of faith. Don't have time to tell you this, but within the first few weeks of starting at FiberNet, which was, FiberNet was already a going concern when I came, but very, very small. And I came out to be their CFO. Within the first few days, I had somebody walk into the office, identify himself as an IRS agent, and say to me, do you know that your company has not been paying payroll taxes for roughly the last year and that you are personally liable, I need your social security number and your home address and phone number. And that was literally within days of me arriving to start my job. There's a lot of fun stories, actually, that are part of that. But anyway, it was painful. But in the first few years, really painful. But we worked through them and learned a ton. A lot of that's right here. Okay? What are we at? Okay. Any more questions? Yeah, Brad? Okay. Well, again, this has a lot to do with those challenges. About October 31st, 1996, one of the principles I left out of this lecture was called the Carl principle. Carl was a former employee that basically felt very much in control and defended that control vigorously within the organization. Ultimately, because of his misbehaviors, he was terminated. And that employee basically had his finger in a lot of things. He was the technical guy, the guy that had all of the keys, basically. And we found ourselves out of business within just basically one day of firing that guy. I say out of business, but what I really mean is that we lost about 80% of our customers at that point. One of the things that did for us, actually, though, is we got real. Back in the 90s, in our industry, it was pretty common to get out there and get investors to help you fund the company. And most companies were living on investment capital for many, many years to come. Well, we couldn't. We basically, from that moment forward, had to cash flow. And so we cut and we did everything we could to make sure that we could make payroll. And ultimately, I would say that one thing led to one of the most important, fundamentally, tortoise-like, whatever you want to call it, changes within our company culture. And as a result of that, Brad, what happened was basically my brother and I were the only people who decided to hold on. I didn't get a paycheck for about 2 years, and that was pretty tough. But through that, my pay was we gained control of the company. Okay, I saw one more hand out there. Anybody else? Yeah. I'm going to answer that in a different way. When I was working for my dad, back in those early 90s that I was telling you about after coming out of BYU, I remember distinctly a moment where I was asking, why was I, coming in to work in a suit and tie, and my dad was coming in his tracksuit. Anyway, I pretty quickly figured it out that I hadn't earned the right to be able to come into the office and wear a tracksuit. So if I don't own a Rolls Royce, don't think I will ever own a Rolls Royce, to be honest, but if I ever were to own a Rolls Royce, I know that there would be interesting consequences, and I would never do it until later, but my kids are always watching. So in the spirit of raising my family and human capital, I don't think I will ever own a Rolls Royce.